What's the matter? What'd you lose?
Handheld.
Oh, had it right here.
It's right here.
We went over here. It's not here. Okay.
Check. Check. Check one. Check one. Check one. Yep. Oh, they're saying it's good?
I can hear it. Thank you.
I don't know how much the room could hear it.
I think he didn't have enough. So, you know.
Check.
Sting testing. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, we don't hear it up here. Testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. No, hello. Anybody out there? Can't hear anything. So, testing. This one's good. Okay.
Check. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Check. Check. check, check. 1 2 1 2 1 2. Check, check, check. Check, check. Check, check, check. Check, check, check. 1 2. Check, check, check. 1 2 1 2 1 2. Check, check, check. Check in. 1 2 3 4. Check, check, check. Check, check, check. Check, check. Check, 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 check. One. Yeah, I see that. Check, check, check. So we're getting signal. Check, check. Hello. Check, 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 check. Check, check, check. Check in, check in, check. Check, check, check. Check, 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 check. 1 2 1 2 1 2. Check, 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 check.
Yeah, and some of them are like a guy on out for pay. That's usually the case. The parents are talking.
Check, 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 check. Check in. 1 2 1 2. Check, check, check. 1 2 1 2. Check, check, check. 1 2 1 2. Check, 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 check. Check, check, check.
See chatter.
Check, 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 check.
Okay.
Check in. 1 2 3. Check,
It's not
check.
plugged in right.
Check, check, check. 1 2 1 2. Check, 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 check. 1 2 1 2 1 2. Should be seeing levels here. Check, 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 check. Check, check, check. 1 2 1 2. Check, check, check. Check, check, check. 1 2 1 2. Check, check.
trying this out.
Check, 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 check.
Do you want to swap this? Yeah. Okay. Make sure that I see it on mine.
Please take your seats. Checkity check, check, check. I'm talking. Ask everybody to please take your seats. Please take your seats. I know I'm trying to get them up. So asking everybody to please take your seats. Should I use a roving mic? I can grab a roving mic. Do you want me to use a roving mic? Can I get everybody to please take your seats? Can I get everyone to please be seated? Can I get everyone to please be seated? Please take your seats. Yeah, I know they're tweaking it right now. So if I could get everyone to please take your seats. We want to make sure we're starting our program right at 2, and it's about 1:45, so I got my general announcements that I like to do. So if we get everybody to please take your seats. We're still working on the volume, kind of tweaking. Are we here? How are we hearing me in the back of the room? Are we hearing me okay? I'm seeing someone waving no. You want me using a roving mic? Roving. Okay.
Check. Back to the wireless, cool. If I could get everyone to please take your seats. Are you hearing me in the back very much? I bet you're not hearing me in the back very much. Are you hearing me? Barely. Yep, that's what I thought. Okay, that's a little better. Okay, they're still working on it. They're fine-tuning and tweaking, so. We're going to jump right in and get started. Hopefully we can start our program right at 2. Hopefully I can get some, there we go. Hopefully we'll start our program right at 2. I believe we're live streaming right now too, so if you're watching from around the world, I got thumbs up on live streaming. If you're watching from around the world, thank you for joining us. We're coming to you live from New Brighton, Minnesota. My name is Tom Maher. I'm the Minnesota MUFON State Director, and a couple things that we always like to go through every month when we start our monthly meetings. And welcome to the June monthly meeting of Minnesota MUFON. One of the things we go through at our monthly meetings is we talk about what is MUFON's mission and what are our goals. And usually I quiz the audience. I'm not going to quiz the audience today for sake of time, but MUFON's mission is the scientific study of UFOs for the benefit of humanity. And MUFON has 3 goals, and the 3 goals that we have is to investigate UFO sightings. That's what we do right here at Minnesota MUFON. Our field investigators investigate sightings. Promote UFO research. That happens more at the national or the global level of the organization. And our 3rd goal is to educate the public, and that's what we do here the second Saturday of every month. We bring you all together, and we attempt to educate the public. So like I said, we meet here at the second Saturday of every month. We start at 1 o'clock with the social hour, and we actually start our more formal meeting at 2 o'clock. So like I said, I am the state director, but of course I can't do this all on my own, and nor would I even try to do it all on my own. So I've got some people that I would like to introduce to you, and actually we've got a couple big announcements too. Minnesota MUFON has a new assistant state director, so I'm going to ask Mike Harris, our assistant state director, to please stand. Give Mike a big round of applause. If you've been a regular here at Minnesota MUFON, I'm sure you've seen Mike. Mike is a lifetime MUFON member. He's been very involved, and he's been on the board for a number of years. And one thing I like about Mike is he's always kind of saw where his comfort level is, and he's always tried to grow beyond that. He'd say, I'm comfortable with this, we need more. He would step up and take more. So he's always about learning and growing, and I really appreciate that about Mike. And the other big announcement that we have to make, we also have a new board member.
And I'm sure you've seen him. He's here all the time. He's always working hard. He's working diligently. He's working hard right now. Mr. Tom Woods in the back there has joined the board. Please give Tom a big round of applause. I always talk about how great our CTV crew is because they bust chops and they, take no prisoners. And Tom Woods is huge on that. And not only is he huge with the CTV crew, he's also really big with our YouTube channel. So I want to make sure I acknowledge him. Some other people that I want to acknowledge, Mr. Bill McNeff is here. He's our chief investigator and director of communications. I saw him come in, or did he leave? Did he sneak out? I did see him come in, didn't I? I did. Okay, he must have snuck out. So Bill is here. Give Bill a round of applause. And you saw her when you checked in. Our secretary and treasurer, Kathy Blixford, in the back. Give Kathy a round of applause. And all of us could not do it all on our own either. We have a full board of directors and a group of field investigators that actually go out and investigate the sighting. So if you're on the board of directors or a field investigator, please stand and receive a round of applause. Let's give our board of directors and field investigators a round of applause. Those are the people that make Minnesota MUFON happen. So I want to tell you a little bit about today's meeting. I'd like to ask you all right now to please turn off your cell phones, or as they put in my instructions, put your cell phones on stun. Today's presentation is obviously going to be recorded. If you don't want to be recorded, please try to sit toward the back. And we'll be streaming live on the internet too. And this presentation is coming in 3 parts. Part 1 will be Jim's presentation, which will be stopping no later than 3:30, at which point we'll say goodbye to the live stream audience, and we're going to take about a 10 to 15-minute intermission. There will be no Q&A in Part 1. So Part 2 will consist of selected videos that aren't suitable for live streaming. The videos are going to run about roughly 20 minutes. If Jim has not completed his presentation, he will resume after the selected videos. When the presentation is complete, he will open it up for Q&A. So you will have an opportunity to ask Jim some questions. For those watching on live stream, don't worry. Our CTV crew is going to edit and post everything. They're going to complete the video and include Jim's full presentation and the Q&A, so you'll be able to see all that on YouTube. So you won't miss anything if you're watching live stream. You just won't be able to see it all live with us, but you'll see the first part live. Our upcoming meetings in July, we've got Jessica Freeberg speaking. She'll be speaking on Monsters of the Midwest. And if we have time, we're going to watch a 2017 MUFON Symposium video, The Secret Space Program, What You Need to Know. And then in August, we've got a couple Skywatch TV videos. We checked with Skywatch TV. We checked the copyrights and got clearance to show their videos. We've got Gary Stearman and Daryl Sims. We'll be watching some of their videos. And then another big announcement. We had, here's Bill McNeff. Give Bill McNeff a round of applause, our Chief Investigator, Director of Communications. If you recall, back at Craig Lang's Memorial, we announced that Starworks USA was going to be doing donating a ticket to a raffle for admission to Starworks USA every year in Craig's honor. So we announced that we'll be having the drawing in July. So I believe to qualify for the drawing, you must be a MUFON member, and then just go see Kathy in the back and put your name in the fishbowl, and you'll be entered for the drawing. We'll have the drawing take place next month at this meeting. So let's see. I mentioned our YouTube channel. Our YouTube channel. Who's been out to our YouTube channel? A good handful, cool. We've currently got 829 subscribers as when I checked our YouTube channel just about an hour ago or so. If you go out to our YouTube channel, go out to YouTube, put in Minnesota MUFON, find our channel, select subscribe. Because right now we're at 829 subscribers. Once we hit 1,000 subscribers, YouTube starts paying us when people watch our videos. So we're getting lots of views on our videos, but we're not getting paid for any of them because we don't have enough subscribers. So I want to encourage you to go out there. If you're not subscribed, go out there and just click on subscribe, watch our videos. Once we hit that 1,000, we'll start the money coming in, and because that's really important. Because our admission has been $3 for members, $5 for non-members for many years. It's come up at the board a number of times that do we need to raise our rates at the door? We've really resisted that. The reason why we've resisted that is because we want to educate the public is one of our goals, and to do that, we feel like making it as easy as possible for people to come to us is very important. So we want to keep those numbers low. So if we can start bringing in money through YouTube, that would help us keep those numbers at 3 and 5, which we really want to do to make it easy for everyone to come through our door. So anyone have any questions about YouTube or how to find it or how to find us on YouTube? Because we've got hours and hours and hours of videos out there, and Tom Woods and the CTV crew are going to be putting more hours out there. So there's lots of stuff from Minnesota MUFON for you to watch. Who's here for the first time? Any first timers? I see 2, 3, 4. Okay, cool. All right. Well, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to hear from the people who are visiting us for the first time. If you wouldn't mind, stand, telling us your name and how you heard about us. We had a couple here. If you're comfortable with that.
My name is Sandy McInerney, and I heard it from watching TV,
Nice.
For years, and reading books for years, and my daughter just joined me.
Cool. Very cool. Thank you for coming out. And we had another one here.
My name is Linda, and I heard about you through my friends who came to the presentation last time.
Very cool. Very cool. Thank you for coming out. We had a couple over here.
I'm Robin, and my friend Audrey mentioned this. However, she knows I have listened very closely.
Cool. Cool. Thank you for joining us. I think we had somebody right in the middle here. Nice, nice. Thank you for coming out. And we had someone in the back, I think, yes? Or no? No one in the back? And I know Jim Rodger raised his hand too. It's his first time. I don't know, do you want to tell, or do you want to wait till you're introduced for your presentation?
No, that's okay. I've been working with Bob Schultz for years and years. And, so that's how I became acquainted with this and Minnesota MUFON. And I subscribe to the YouTube and to cable TV channel 15 as well. So
Cool, very cool. Well, thanks for coming out and thanks for presenting to us today. Was there anyone else here for the first time that I missed? Anyone else? No. Okay, cool. The next I want to know is who's become a new MUFON member since the last time? Are you a new MUFON member since the last time you were here?
Well, I was a member last time I was here as well, so.
You were. Well, did you want to just stand up and tell us your name again?
My name is Renee Patterson, and I joined a couple months ago. Last month was the first meeting that I made.
Nice, cool. Thank you for coming out. Any new MUFON members here? No new MUFON members. Okay, cool. So I want to let you know, like we do after most of our meetings, we will be going out to dinner tonight. We'll be going, and Mike, do you need a count for dinner? You need an estimation? No, he doesn't need an estimation. So we'll be going to Sarna's, which is where we normally go. Sarna's is located at 3939 University Avenue Northeast. So from here, you want to go up to 694. From 694, go west to University. And on University, you want to go south or toward Minneapolis. And when you get to 40th and University, take a left, and it's right there on the right. It's right on the corner of 40th and University, 3939 University Avenue Northeast. So feel free to come on up and have a nice dinner with us and chat and get to know people better. We do that every month after meetings. We've got a sign up front, and you may have noticed it, you may not have noticed it. It's got 3 pieces of information on it. It's got my email address and 2 websites on it. So I want to run those by you real quick. My email address, in case you need to get a hold of me for anything, is mufontom@epcoachtom.com. And if you need it again, it is back on a sign there. You can get it, but mufontom@epcoachtom.com. And then we've got the Minnesota MUFON website, which is www.mnmufon.org. www.mnmufon.org. And finally, of course, we have to have MUFON's website out there. So, and that is www.mufon.com. And see, Kathy's holding up the sign right there. So that's what it looks like. If you need any of that, it's right back there. www.mufon.com. So that actually wraps up my announcements. So I'm looking to the video crew because we can just chill for 5 minutes till 2 o'clock, or do we want to jump right in? I'm cool either way. We can just take a deep breath. Jump right in. Well, I got to go with the video crew. Make sure they're because make sure they're ready. Of course, all the people watching us live around the world too. We don't, if they're expecting us at 2, we'd hate to have them miss out anything that we say. And wait till 2. Okay, we're gonna wait till 2. So we got just a couple minutes. So if you got any questions, feel free to throw them out. If I can answer them, I will. Yes, sir.
I have a comment about getting the word out to people.
Okay.
And you said that one of our goals is to get people to understand the mission and what MUFON is and what it does. And I think it's more, there's more that we can do. I find myself on a bus, or I find myself in a meeting, or I find myself just sitting around a table talking to people. And every time I do that, if they ask me about UFOs, I talk about MUFON.
Mm-hmm.
I talk about, I think the more that we can make contact with individuals through our friends, that's really important. And I'm not sure a lot of people feel comfortable about it. But just tell them your story.
Yep.
Tell them what's going on.
Yep, I agree completely, and it just kind of along that same line too. This is a great conversation starter. Not that I'm trying to sell MUFON merchandise or anything, but more than one time I've had either this on or my MUFON ID been walking, and not even really thinking that I've got it on, and someone will look at it and go, "Oh, what's that? Tell me what that's about." So, or maybe having a pin on your hat or something like that. So yeah, definitely putting something out there so it's easy for people to make that connection, because sometimes it's one of those topics that people don't necessarily want to bring up, especially with a stranger, because they don't want someone to think they're crazy. So, but if you've already got a little symbol on there, it kind of gives them permission to go in that direction. So. And I'm noticing a discrepancy between my phone time and the time on the wall. So I'm showing 1:59. Is that what you guys are going with? Okay, because the phone on the wall, clock on the wall is a little bit behind, so. 30 seconds, okay. And please take your seats, and pretty much everyone has done that, so thank you for that. Good afternoon and welcome to Minnesota MUFON's June meeting 2018, coming to you live from New Brighton, Minnesota. Today we have a special guest coming all the way from Fitzwilliam, New Hampshire. Jim Rodgers is an aviator, television producer, researcher, and remote viewing professional. In 1997, Jim studied remote viewing with the Western States Remote Viewing Association under Wayne Carr, PhD. He practiced and honed his skills for about a year and a half, and before working targets for hire as a professional. He continues to teach and refine the process, training people from all walks of life and levels of education. Jim will be presenting a broad overview of the reality of remote viewing. Topics include: what is remote viewing? Difference between remote viewing and psychic phenomena, defining higher consciousness, the in-the-box control culture we live in, modern history of remote viewing, explanation of protocols, military Project Stargate, functional differences between the left brain versus the right brain, importance of local sidereal time, or LST, an explanation of the 5 stages of remote viewing protocols, and timelining a target. Please join me in giving a big, warm Minnesota MUFON welcome to Jim Rodger.
Hey, I guess you can hear me okay, everybody? Very good. This first slide, oh, by the way, I'm very thankful for being here. Minnesota MUFON, you've been very kind to me. It's been a great experience in coming here. And so I'm happy to bring this information to you. I think I selected this first image. This is a cloud of gas and dust. It's billions of miles away, way, way out there. And it portrays the idea of thought. Thought is endless. It has no limits as to where it can go. And so I just love this image anyway. So where am I? Here's the clicker. All right, this is my MUFON Field Investigators card, by the way. And Walt Andrus from Seguin, Texas signed it back in 97, the same year I studied remote viewing in the beginning. And so I'm one of you guys. And right from the get-go, I want to explain that remote viewing is an extremely important tool in UFO research. Through blind remote viewing, a blind observation, you can come down with unbiased information about what has happened in certain events and sightings and so forth. So it can be an extremely useful tool in the UFO research. And also a little bit about my career. My primary job and source of income was troubleshooting in industrial electronics. I worked in large electrical power plants, 500 megawatt, the big coal units, the monsters. And one mistake with a logic probe in those circuits, you could knock 500 megawatts right off the grid. So you had to be very careful at what I was doing. And I was also a supervisor in that field. I'm also still licensed in the state of Arizona as a high voltage substation apparatus electrician. And in that field, you usually only make one mistake. You're just not around after that. It's dangerous work. And I finished up the last 8 years in my field working with microwave data from control rooms to substations, controlling the electricity on the grid through microwave data communications. I also produced 137 live 1-hour cable TV shows. And at the end of each month, I would send these shows out to 19 other co-producers all around the country. Most of it was UFO stuff, UFO related, and mysteries, ancient mysteries as well. And so I know I was reaching 7 million viewers, 7 million cable subscribers, but I really don't know how many were actually watching it. But I did that for a long time. And before I did that, I don't have that in here on the slide, but I worked for Ted Lohman in Tucson at Tucson Access TV. And I directed 154 of his UFO AZ shows and off-the-record shows. He later rolled a name over. So I have a long background in cable TV as well. And as far as my remote viewing goes, in 1997, I started remote viewing with the Western States Remote Viewing Association under Dr. Wayne Carr. Following that, I honed my skills for about 1.5 years to the point where I then began working targets for hire. And that all started after about 1.5 years. I decided to try medical remote viewing, just for the experience. There's another type of remote viewing just for diagnosing things in the medical field. And I was doing the first target. We're sitting at a long table like this one right here. And I got into it, and I had this really strong gut feeling. Well, first of all, I drew a profile of a human skeleton, and I had an arrow pointing to the back of the neck, and I wrote C4, C5, cervical spine. And I drew a picture of a wheelchair. This person's paralyzed. His injury was right here at C4 and C5. And I looked at Dr. Carr, and I said, I know who this person is. He said, sure, tell me another one. He said, hold up your paper. Put it down. When you're in remote viewing, one part of your brain functions, dominates more than the other side. I knew who the person was, but I couldn't think of his name. So I said, I wrote on the paper, Superman. Everybody remember? Yeah. So that's who it was, in fact. So at that point is when he wanted me. So anyways, I began teaching right from the get-go in 1997, the process, because I loved teaching it and watching the light bulb light up in people when they learn this and they realize, I really can do this. That means something else, too, that you're really connected to all other things throughout the universe. And so that's why I do it. That's why I enjoy it. And let's see, enjoy watching a light bulb go on. I mentioned this the first time they discover that they are connected to all other sentient things in the universe. So, first question, what is remote viewing? Remote viewing is the ability to obtain accurate information about any person, place, thing, or event, or even a concept at any point in time or space. Remote viewing data usually flows as a continuous stream, and that's what the protocols were designed to do, to keep the data flowing without breaking the data flow, for a continuous stream of data. And two requirements are that the remote viewers that are involved, in order to really verify this stuff, should be blind, not knowing, no foreknowledge, we call it front loading in remote viewing, of what they're working on. And the data has to be verifiable, so that you could verify that this really was something real that they were working on. So that's two good requirements. Now, the difference between remote viewing and psychic phenomena is that's when the person has the ability to produce information for which there is no direct access. Psychic data usually comes as a flash, and sometimes it's like a short film clip, 4 or 5 seconds. Oh, I saw this, and but not as a continuous stream of data as in remote viewing. It's different. Okay. The ancient prophets practiced a related form of remote viewing through dreams, visions, and other altered states of mind, and through their accessing of higher non-local consciousness. And there's a point in this presentation, we'll talk much more about non-local consciousness. There's more to your consciousness than seeing what's around you or feeling the things around you, your temperature and so forth. There's much more than that. And there's a little thing here with Dr. Quantum coming up. We'll get into that. Okay. So some common examples of higher consciousness are, for example, I bet everybody in this room has had this experience. You'll meet a stranger, a perfect stranger for the first time. You'll go to shake hands, and all of a sudden the hair stands up on the back of your neck. There's something wrong here. Something wrong. I don't know what it is, but there's something. And sometimes it's just the opposite, warm and fuzzy. Boy, I really like this person. I don't know why, but I do. So that's an example of a higher knowing, a higher consciousness. And another example is if we have an important decision to make, sometimes there's two paths or two ways we can do something. One way is more complicated, much more difficult. The other way is quick and easy. But there's usually two voices talking to you. One voice is saying, no, do it the quick and easy way. You'll be done with it. It'll be out of your way. The other voice might say, no, this might hurt someone's feelings. This is going to take more time, more headache, but you should do it this way. And so we have this dichotomy inside of us sometimes, these two voices. And we really need to listen to the higher level of consciousness. So usually the one that wants us to do it the more difficult way is what's really best for us in most cases. It's kind of like listening to that higher consciousness is if you had two radios side by side in front of each ear, and one of them is real loud playing, blasting crazy noise or even just white noise. This one's really has something interesting, but it's not very loud and you can't hear it because of this one. So if you can learn how to shut this one down, this one becomes very clear, even though it's very weak. So that's kind of like the idea of when you first get into using higher consciousness and remote viewing, things of that nature. Many law enforcement officers, both of my sons are police officers in Arizona, by the way, they develop a very strong, deep, intuitive gut feelings over the years. They learn to rely on those intuitive gut feelings, especially when there's nothing else to go on. Sometimes they'll have absolutely nothing, and they'll just take a hunch. And from that hunch, they actually might find evidence that can begin the process of investigation. So a lot of police officers or detectives will tell you this. They'll stand by what I just said. And also, we do live in a controlled culture. First of all, the media generally frowns or laughs at out-of-the-box concept or ideas or people. On the other hand, the same media likes to manipulate you. For example, if you don't run out and buy those brand new pair of Nike shoes they're advertising, you're not cool. You need those Nikes. That's what I'm trying to tell you. And a lot of times, and I think it's changing now. They used to have the giggle factor when they'd report a UFO sighting on the news. He saw a UFO sighting, like something's wrong with him. But I think that's starting to disappear now, if I'm correct. I'm seeing much less and less of that as time goes on. And that's a good thing. Also, religion generally is against new ideas that threaten their long-held doctrines. For example, Galileo, in all his astronomical research, was accurate, but he was forced to recant it. And finally, 500 years later, an apology came to him. It was a little late. And this other fellow, Giordano Bruno, and countless others were actually burned to death for expressing their views and their concepts of the universe around us. And they were correct, by the way. So presently, religions to some degree still resist new ideas or concepts that threaten their established belief system. And this is continued. And science, almost every new invention that comes from science comes from somebody with an out-of-the-box idea. You must think out of the box if you're going to come up with anything new. There's an old saying among scientists, and I learned this from Dr. Claude Swanson, by the way, that science advances by one funeral at a time. They kick the old ideas out and open up to a new open mind of research. And it's very true. You know, all of our big inventions and innovations most of them came from somebody that was thinking out of the box. Thomas Edison used to sit in a chair with two big ball bearings in his hand in an altered state of mind. And he didn't want to fall asleep, so if he fell asleep, the balls would fall out of his hand and clank in the pan and wake him up. So he was out of the box. Tesla was out of the box. Almost all the great innovations and inventions came from minds that were out of the box. If you want something new, you have to think in that frame. Okay. Academia, when it comes to revolutionary thinking, many university professors often are threatened with loss of tenure or passed over when it comes time for a promotion. A good example of this is the late Dr. John Mack. He had a lot of difficulty with Harvard University, but ultimately he won out. We're grateful for that. So remote viewing now is, to most people, an out-of-the-box concept with respect to all of these institutions. And actually, the Book of Psalms in the Bible, for many of the Bible people, the Book of Psalms says, may you constantly be found in prayer and meditation. Or in other words, if you're praying, you're transmitting a message. If you're in meditation, you're receiving it. So you're interacting with higher consciousness. That's a command from the Bible. And the early history, remote viewing we talk about for a few minutes here. Our CIA found out about a Soviet spying, a psychic spying program. And in the beginning, the CIA was not too worried about it. They knew the Soviets were spending about 60 million rubles per year in this subject of psychic spying or remote viewing. But all of a sudden in 1970, from 1970 onward, their budget jumped up to 300 million rubles per year. And this suggested that the breakthroughs, major breakthroughs had been achieved, and we got nervous. So our CIA responded by initiating our own psychic spying research program at Stanford Research Institute. And those efforts were began involving Ingo Swann, Russell Targ, Hal Puthoff. Thus, the American Project Stargate was born. And Ingo Swann, Hal Puthoff, Russell Targ developed the original set of protocols for remote viewing at SRI. And we'll talk a lot more about that later on. And there's some pictures of him. There's Ingo, he's no longer with us. And there's Hal and Russell Targ. So Project Stargate was a military psychic spying program. And officially, Project Stargate lasted from 20 years, 1975 to 1995, at a known cost of $20 million. Joe McMoneagle was there throughout the entire program. He was the first person in the door at the beginning, and when the program was finally closed down, he was the last person out the door after that ended. I guess what had happened was when Congress found out that this was going on, they had their own little pet things they wanted them to do, and the thing just got out of control. They said, that'll do it. So personally, I think they're using private contractors right now. Project Stargate was conducted under a variety of other code names, AKA, also known as Sunstreak, Girl Flame, Center Lane, Scannic. And there's people that were involved with that. A few of them, I don't have all of them, photos. Joe McMoneagle, Paul Smith, Lynn Buchanan, Ed Dames. Art Bell called him Dr. Doom. And Jim has been on my old TV show 2 or 3 times, at least 2 times, sure I know. But he's an author and a reporter, and he was the first one to publicly break the story about Project Stargate, a psychic spying program, on the media, on the ABC Nightline program. I think it was November 28th, 1995. And Jim also authored the book Crossfire, and also authored another book called Psychic Spies. His book Crossfire was about the Kennedy assassination, and Oliver Stone used that book as a basis for the movie about the Kennedy assassination. So it all emanated from Jim Marrs and his research. He was a wonderful guy, a wonderful reporter. So what is a remote viewing protocol? It is a repetitive roadmap-like procedure designed to access and maintain a continuous flow of target-related data. When you're working as a remote viewer in a protocol, you have to know the protocol so well that you can just flash right through it, through the procedure. And if you have to stop and wonder, oh boy, what am I supposed to be doing here now? You'll probably lose the connection of the flow, the source of your data. So you have to really know the protocols well. And in the beginning, it's a little tedious, you're learning your way through them to get to that level. But once you do, it's pretty clear sailing. So, and the viewer must become so familiar with the protocols that they can effortlessly work through them. Okay, eventually, the military project Stargate was decommissioned, and those who were involved eventually retired and brought their protocols home with them. Retired military remote viewers began teaching it. From there, the rest is history. It got into foundations were started. It got into universities, and then actually industry started calling upon these foundations for information. They wanted to know the who, what, how, where, when, and why their competition was doing what it was doing in order to have a leg up on them. So there's a lot of industrial work done in remote viewing. And this one here is an interesting video. I guess I just click on it to start it? Okay, left. Oh, the next one. Uh-oh, is this right? I'll enlarge it. Okay.
And here we are, the granddaddy of all
Is this the right?
quantum
Okay.
weirdness, the infamous double-slit experiment. To understand this experiment, we first need to see how particles, or little balls of matter, act.
You want me to take it out?
If we randomly shoot a small object, say
Okay.
a marble, at the screen.
Okay. There's nothing down there. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I know that. Yeah. Thank you.
And here we are, the granddaddy of all quantum weirdness, the infamous double-slit experiment. To understand this experiment, we first need to see how particles, or little balls of matter, act. If we randomly shoot a small object, say a marble, at the screen, we see a pattern on the back wall where they went through the slit and hit. Now, if we add a second slit, we would expect to see a second band duplicated to the right. Now, let's look at waves. The waves hit the slit and radiate out, striking the back wall with the most intensity directly in line with the slit. The line of brightness on the back screen shows that intensity. This is similar to the line the marbles make. But when we add the second slit, something different happens. If the top of one wave meets the bottom of another wave, they cancel each other out. So now there is an interference pattern on the back wall. Places where the two tops meet are the highest intensity, the bright lines, and where they cancel, there is nothing. So, when we throw things, that is, matter, through two slits, we get this, two bands of hits. And with waves, we get an interference pattern of many bands. Good so far. Now, let's go quantum. An electron is a tiny, tiny bit of matter, like a tiny marble. Let's fire a stream through one slit. It behaves just like the marble, a single band. So, if we shoot these tiny bits through two slits, we should get like the marbles, two bands. What? An interference pattern. We fired electrons, tiny bits of matter through. But we get a pattern like waves, not like little marbles. How? How could pieces of matter create an interference pattern like a wave? It doesn't make sense. But physicists are clever. They thought, maybe those little balls are bouncing off each other and creating that pattern. So they decide to shoot electrons through one at a time. There is no way they could interfere with each other. But after an hour of this, the same interference pattern is seen to emerge. The conclusion is inescapable. The single electron leaves as a particle, becomes a wave of potentials, goes through both slits, and interferes with itself to hit the wall like a particle. But mathematically, it's even stranger. It goes through both slits and it goes through neither. And it goes through just one and it goes through just the other. All of these possibilities are in superposition with each other. But physicists were completely baffled by this. So they decided to peek and see which slit it actually goes through. They put a measuring device by one slit to see which one it went through and let it fly. But the quantum world is far more mysterious than they could have imagined. When they observed, the electron went back to behaving like a little marble. It produced a pattern of two bands, not an interference pattern of many. The very act of measuring or observing which slit it went through meant it only went through one, not both. The electron decided to act differently, as though it was aware it was being watched. And it was here that physicists stepped forever into the strange, never world of quantum events. What is matter? Marbles or waves? And waves of what? And what does an observer have to do with any of this? The observer collapsed the wave function simply by observing.
This comes from that movie, What the Bleep Do We Know Of? I don't know if you've ever seen that movie, but it's a great film. The reason I wanted to show this clip was because that's the one I should have ran, huh? Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, I apologize. I didn't realize it was right there. Okay. All right. The reason I ran this clip was because every time the experiment is scientifically repeatable. This was discovered in the mid-'60s, this double slit experiment. And every time the experiment is observed, it's altered. It goes back from the wave to the double slit pattern every single time it's observed. So what does that prove? That proves that there are non-local aspects of our consciousness that interfere with things. We're observing it. Our consciousness is measuring it and looking at it. So that brings out the point of non-local aspects of our consciousness. So there's some level of awareness or consciousness, by the way, and all other living things, from humans to plants to simple cells, we're all connected to each other through a higher level of consciousness, or a universal field of consciousness, as some would call it. Even viruses mutate when they're attacked. They know, I've got to change, I'm being attacked. And there's a book called The Secret Life of Plants, and it explains the conscious life of plants. And an important thing to remember here is that we're all connected through the same field of consciousness. And that's that book. And I had a friend, by the way, he worked for the Oklahoma State Police. He was a lie detector expert. And secretly, he didn't want to be laughed at or ridiculed. So secretly, he took his lie detector and hooked it up to a plant, and he thought beautiful things, and the needle on the chart was just very calmly going along. And the minute he started thinking about, I'm going to burn you, I'm going to cut you, I'm going to destroy you, the needle started going all over the chart. And he could do this repeatedly, time after time after time after time. So this speaks of the idea of some form of proto-consciousness to living things, maybe from the micro to the macro. So that's important to remember, because when we're in that higher field of consciousness, we're connected with all of these things. And remote viewing, by the way, is a natural ability that everyone has. But getting it started, if you've never done it before, it's kind of like jump-starting a car. You may have had an old car sitting in the backyard or the end of the driveway. You haven't used it for a long time. It's perfectly good. It just needs a boost to get it started and running again. And after you get it started and running, the battery charges, and it's okay. Well, we're kind of like the same way when we get started in remote viewing. We have that ability. Almost all of us do. And it's just a matter of getting it going. So there is when we're learning remote viewing, we discover a continuous connection between all living things. And when we learn remote viewing, we're actually reviving a dormant ability. It's like atrophied muscles. If somebody's been in a hospital bed too long, to get up and start getting around again, they've got to go through therapy to get those muscles working again. And after a while, they're okay. So in the beginning, learning remote viewing is like that. And another illustration I use, if you've ever learned how to drive a stick shift automobile, you have the clutch pedal, the gas, the brakes, and the shifter. You have to coordinate all of these things. And it might take a few days or even a week or two before you really catch on to it. And after a while, you're doing it, you're shifting the car and driving around, and you're not even thinking about this anymore. You just do it automatically. And that's kind of like working through the protocols in remote viewing is like. It's kind of like learning how to drive a stick shift automobile. So it takes a little practice, but what you put into it, you get out of it. And here's another thing to think about. Imagine if everybody on this planet was a remote viewer. Do you think that they would be lying? Would people be able to tell a lie? Not really, because we'd all know. What about the politicians? Okay, so lifestyle and stress have an awful lot to do with performance in remote viewing. If you have a laid-back lifestyle where you're not too keyed up, that's more helpful. That's better for you if you want to get into remote viewing. I had a job as a technician one time, a troubleshooting technician on a pipeline, and I really didn't have anything to do, and the boss didn't care, as long as when something went wrong, I was right there to correct the problem. So I did a lot of remote viewing, a lot of reading. I had these big gas turbine engines. They were each 4,000 horsepower each, and they ran pumps, but they're like jet engines, but they're pointing up at the sky there. So I had to keep that stuff running, and I could do whatever I wanted to do unless there was a problem. So that was a good job for me as far as for practicing remote viewing, reading books, and so forth. And so as far as remote viewing goes, if you're preparing for a session, you don't want to overeat. You can't have your gut too full to where you're uncomfortable, because that's a distraction. You want to be relaxed, but you don't want to be falling asleep. And you just have to be comfortable. We were instructed to loosen our clothing a little bit and get slouchy, be relaxed. And when we went into a session in the beginning, when I was in training. And one of the cardinal rules in remote viewing is the data is flowing in. You never analyze the data. Never, never, never. It's one of the worst things you can do in remote viewing. And it's a very difficult thing for us humans to learn, because even now as I scan around the room with my eyes, I'm looking at paint textures, reflections, bright lights, different faces, and it's all registering. And it's all part of our normal analytic process. So we have to learn, it takes a little bit of practice to shut that down, so in an unbiased way, as data flows in, we can just receive it and log it without actually getting involved with opinions or ideas about the data. Just let it flow, don't analyze it. From my personal experience, my first day at class when I was learning in 1997, I really felt bad because I was trying too hard. And at the end, I felt really bad. And at the end of the day, we were doing a telepathic experiment, excuse me, with different images. And so he had an image, the instructor, and I said, I think I'm starting to feel something on this. I said, it's smooth and it's coarse at the same time. There was something physical. It was smooth and it was coarse. Well, isn't that don't they contradict each other? How can something be coarse and smooth at the same time? But you don't analyze it. And then there were two strange-looking eyes. This thing had eyes. Looked like an E.T., but no, it's not an E.T. I knew it wasn't an E.T. And there was something really strange in the middle of its face. So finally he said, that's enough. He turned the picture on. It was an owl. It was smooth one way and coarse the other way. Had those strange-looking eyes and the beak on its face. So then at that point, I really started to feel good. And what I learned from that was that, gee, I really am connecting. I really am, it convinced me that I really am a part of all things. So, and that's what happens when we learn remote viewing. We begin to realize our little place in the cosmos. And I've never seen anybody that could effectively teach remote viewing in one of these 8-hour wonder courses. It gets involved in the beginning, and to do it in 8 hours, it's not impossible, but the success rate isn't very good. It can be done in a couple of days with follow-up and consulting afterwards. This, I'll read this out. I don't know how this will look on TV, so I'll read it out. This is the class schedule that I use for my 2-day plus remote viewing workshop. It begins on Saturday morning. Everybody arrives at 8:30. At 9 o'clock sharp, we go to work. And we have a discussion about the history, the how and why of remote viewing, the do's and don'ts of remote viewing, a discussion on the use of protocols, how to work, how to prepare for a session, quieting down our conscious mind, physical body and mind versus higher level consciousness, and explanation between the difference between the two, excuse me, and breathing and relaxation procedures that are involved with remote viewing before you begin a session. And we do some telepathic exercises to show our connectivity and our non-local aspects of consciousness we just talked about a little while ago. And in remote viewing, we use an affirmation. The reason we use an affirmation, a good example of that is if two parents are in the car, they're driving somewhere, and two of the kiddos are in the back seat, they'll keep popping their head up in some cases. Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? So we have our own minds are that way. So we have to pacify our own minds with an affirmation that, oh, I will not analyze any data. I won't do this or that. I'll just let the data flow. And so we have to tell ourselves, remind us before we go into a session. So we use an affirmation that way. I explained what remote viewing targets are, and we'll get into that in a few more minutes or so. And then we do the introduction and the more detailed discussion of the protocols, the how and why we do the things we do in the protocols, and how and why they work. So we talk about target contact and analog overlays and telepathic overlays. You might be, for example, an analog overlay is what we call when you're in a remote viewing session and you're trying to let the data flow, and the same thing just keeps popping up over and over again, and you feel it's interfering with the session. So you write that down, AOL and blah, 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 to try to get it to stop interfering with it, like the kids in the back seat again. So that's what an AOL is, when something keeps popping up. It might be real and it might be true, but you'll want to dismiss it and get it out of the way to move on with the rest of the data. And a telepathic overlay is if you're working beside another remote viewer, and this has happened to me, you might pull down some of their data that has nothing to do with your target. So that happened to me once. So I stopped working there simultaneously with other remote viewers for that reason. And that's a telepathic overlay, by the way. And we have these remote viewing vocabulary drills. I don't know if you can see that board over there. Those are called ideograms. And when you first start working a target, there's a way we have of getting the data to flow. And I use the example of an earthen dam or a dike. If you stuck a pencil through that dike, and you'd get a little bit of water flow coming out. And the longer you let that water flow, the more it flows, and pretty soon you wind up with a gusher, a lot of water coming through. And that's what these ideograms do. It's a way, when you first start into a session, you'll know, this way you use these symbols. You don't have to write out a word. You don't have to think about spelling or writing. You just use those symbols and keep flying, just keep flying. And that's what those things do for you. It's sort of like almost like a form of shorthand. Excuse me. And then we have a Q&A session, and we take a lunch break. And then in the afternoon, we start working targets. And that's the first day. The second day, we already know how to do the remote viewing. We start practicing it through targets and sessions. We take a lot of breaks because the mind needs a little bit of a rest or a break after each target. And then we take a lunch break, practice more targets, and then towards the end of the afternoon, we have a discussion and a demonstration of more advanced techniques of timelining, of figuring out where and when this person, place, thing, or event or concept is that you are remote viewing, to know when it happens or when it's going to happen. And we get into deep mind probing, as to someone's motives. Why did somebody do this, or whatever? It's interesting in terms of crime. And we get into map vectoring. One of the things I like to do with map vectoring is we'll work a target, and at the end, I'll hand out these blank maps with no names, just the coastal outline or an area of a certain geographic location. And when everybody's done, when everybody's marked their spot on the map, I'll put them all together and hold them up in front of a window and let the sun shine through, and usually all their little spots line up in the same place, which is kind of fun. So we do map vectoring, timelining, and I get into a lot of good things, and that's pretty much it. I'm going to talk about the brain for a little bit. The left brain is language, writing, reading, listening, calculation, logic, analysis, and sequencing. And the right brain is creativity, excuse me, conceptual stuff, innovation, ideas, imagery, color, music, and art, dimension, emotion, and daydreaming. And the right brain is usually has the long-term memory aspects to it, and the left brain is short-term. So that's why remote viewing data from higher consciousness flows usually to and from the right brain. The right brain is the conceptual side. That's where usually most musicians come from, people that are really good with music. And they're better suited to interpreting higher consciousness. But during a session, when the right brain takes dominance, and it should, you might discover you can't spell the simplest words in the English language because the right brain has taken dominance. Remember, all the little digital things are from the left brain. So if you reach that point in a session, that's a real good sign, believe it or not. When you log your information, if you have a lot of misspelling, you are probably right on the target with the right brain and the conceptual side. So numbers and spelling generally can go out the window during a session when you have good right brain dominance. So this next part is really interesting. Excuse me. So is there an optimum time or a worst time for remote viewing or for any other type of psychic activity? Now this information that's coming up now is good for anybody that practices other forms of psychic activity other than remote viewing. Yes, it's based on Local Sidereal Time, better known as LST, and that's based upon Earth's rotational position with reference to the fixed star field. My watch right now is on a 24-hour cycle, but it's based on the Earth's rotational position with reference to the sun. LST time, or sidereal time, is based upon our rotational position to the star field around us. And there's a reason why that is important. Why is LST time a position to the star field important to remote viewing or any other type of psychic activity? The answer is because there's an interference pattern emanating from the center of our galaxy. And I'm going to read this to you because I don't think the TV or the camera might be able to see this. But this is from a scientific paper. It says, researchers at the Cognitive Sciences Laboratory at Palo Alto have found that a person's extrasensory perception ability is strongly influenced by his or her orientation relative to the star background field. In particular, in a paper published in the Journal of Scientific Exploration, Dr. James Spottiswoode reports that a clairvoyant's effectiveness in conducting remote viewing was completely null when the galactic center was at its zenith, its highest point in the sky, in other words, a zenith time period of 17.75 hours LST. The diagram below is reproduced from figure 3 of their paper. Also, they found that a clairvoyant's effectiveness with which they plot vertically as the quantity they call effective size reached a maximum at around 13.5 hours LST in the form of a broad peak extending from 12 hours to 14.5 hours LST. This is all going to make much more sense in a few minutes. So during which effectiveness increased about 400%. So this corresponds to a time when the galaxy's north pole is at its zenith, or its highest point, in the galactic north, being situated in the Como Berenice constellation about 30 degrees north of Virgo. This study analyzed remote viewing and was gathered over a period of 20 years. So they did a lot of heavy research on this. And here's the curve. I'll use the, can I use the cursor? Yeah. This is when you should do a target or any other type of psychic activity. This is the best time. And this is the worst time. There's a difference of 400%. And so it's important to know that, and I'll show you how you find out these times. This is an LST time clock, and the URL below, I guess I click on that? Okay, good. So the way it works is you put your city in right here, and just enter the time here, your local time, and the Local Sidereal Time will come up right here. So we'll go to that website, and we'll see what time it is here, LST-wise, that is. Oh, can I enlarge that? I don't know. I'll find. Let's see, Minneapolis. Control Plus. Okay. Oh, excellent. Beautiful. Thank you. Okay, and now I have 246, 1447. That's about right. So we'll click on this. And local sidereal time here is 6 hours and 47 minutes. So if we go backwards and look at the chart again, I'll X out of this. We'll look at the chart. 6 hours and 47 minutes. We're just about here right now. So tonight might be a really good time to get into some of these things. So there we are right there, about almost 6.5, right about here, just about where that marker is there. So when we worked, and by the way, just one other thing here before I get ahead of myself. This is the constellation Scorpio, or Scorpius. And at the tail of the scorpion stinger this X here is where the center of our galaxy is. That's where the interference pattern emanates that they've been studying for 20 years. This is what we want to stay away from. And so when I worked professionally, they would always tell us if we didn't know the best times to do our work, our targeting work. And it corresponded to that time clock and those graphs and so forth. But you can do this on your very own once you know about this. And it's very beneficial. Okay, this is a midsummer night looking probably due south. And you see this Scorpio and Sagittarius, and center of the galaxy is in between them. This was my old website. I took that down. There was a lot of information I provided there. So what is a remote viewing target? A target is the object of a remote viewing session. It is the person, place, thing, object, or concept that you want information upon. The target coordinates are a coded reference of a target to be viewed without actually identifying. In other words, if somebody was going to say, okay, I'm going to hand you a target, and they wrote, let's say, Kennedy assassination on it. Maybe you wanted to find out how many shooters there were or something like that. So if I wrote Kennedy assassination and I gave it to you, you'd automatically be biased about it because you have your own feelings about it and so forth. So by using alpha, numerics, numbers or letters, you really don't know what it is. So your bias can't enter the situation. So that's why we use these so-called target coordinates. And down below, let's see, there's an example. Usually we use two randomly generated 4-digit numbers. You can use letters, you can use numbers, you can use combination of both, alphanumerics. But the easiest way to do it is to use two randomly generated 4-digit numbers. You can take a hand calculator, you can take your cell phone, put it in the calculator mode, and randomly punch up the first 4 digits that appear across your screen, and you take the next one, next number for the second number. We use two numbers for accuracy and reliability. And then what we do is we take those two 4-digit numbers and you memorize them with reference to the target. Once you memorize those two 4-digit numbers, they become forever connected to that event or whatever it is you're remote viewing. And that establishes the connection for any other remote viewer to come along and look at this target or examine it. And it's extremely useful in UFO stuff. So the personnel involved in remote viewing are a viewer, a monitor, and a facilitator usually. And if you're working alone, you're all three. Or maybe you have a buddy that sends you targets. Would you please do this for me? Okay, all right. But anyways, the viewer actually works the target. The monitor oversees and will direct the viewer at the right time. Sometimes a viewer, working in a remote viewing foundation or something like that, will have a very highly complex target. And the monitor will, at some point, intercede and tell the viewer, go this way or that way, and to get the information they're really looking for. And so that's what a monitor does. And a facilitator creates and organizes the targets, the sessions, the time, maybe doing the LST time calculations for the viewers that are going to be working the targets. So that's what the facilitator does. So you have the viewer, the monitor, and the facilitator. We'll talk a little bit about data. There's different configurations or ways of remote viewing. Type 1 is when a viewer is alone, he has some foreknowledge about the target. And it usually takes a very experienced remote viewer to work a target like that because they're trained, they don't let their bias interfere. So they can work with a little bit of a front loading, we call it foreknowledge or front loading. And type 2 data is when the viewer is alone, he's blind, and he's working a random target. And type 3 data is when the viewer is solo, he's blind, he has no idea what he's working on, and the target was selected by a third party. That's most of the time what people who work alone do. Usually they're doing something they've generated a while ago, they've put it away in the drawer, they have no idea of what it is, and sometime later they'll pull it back out and work on it in an unbiased way. Or maybe a friend will give you a target and you'll do it for them. and that's what the way number 3 data works. And number 4 data is where the viewer is solo, he's blind, has no foreknowledge, no front loading of the target, but the monitor knows what to look for at the right time. So that's type 4 data. Type 5 is when the viewer, the monitor, and the facilitator are all blind. The target is selected by a third or an outside party. This is what industry wants. They want absolute triple blindness on that type of work. And, whoops, sorry about that, I bumped it. And then type 6 data, remote viewing data, the viewer and the monitor are both, I bumped this thing again, I'm sorry. There we are. Both the monitor and the viewer are both front-loaded, and this is really seldom used. I don't know anybody that's working like that. So most remote viewing is done in type 3, solo blind. Most professional work is done in type 5. Okay. Some of the prerequisites for not only just a remote viewing session, but other types of psychic activity, if you're interested in, excuse me. You need to be relaxed. You don't want to be hopped up on caffeine. You don't want to have too much spicy food in your stomach, or too much food in general. A nice hot bath or a shower is good before doing a session. And even listening to some relaxing music. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Hemisync music from the Monroe Foundation. Anybody heard of it? It's good stuff, isn't it? And the way that works, it's really beautiful, pleasant music. But in one ear you might have a subliminal 100 cycle tone. In the other ear might be 103 cycles. And that tone difference is what veggies you out. It's really so relaxing. They tell you, don't listen to this stuff and drive the car. So you don't want to be tired. If you're tired, don't even consider doing a session. And most psychic work isn't good to be done by a tired person. And we do a breathing exercise. I won't get into it right now, but I'll mention it. That's a form of pranayama designed to relax you. We do it for a full 15 minutes. And the way we were instructed was to take your index finger, point it straight up. That's a chore for your local mind. Holding that finger up, then you take this finger and the thumb, and you do your nostril breathing. At the same time, your mind is involved with this task. And after about 15 minutes, you'll find that you're somewhere else. Excuse me. So focusing on the target, help in that area is achieved with the affirmation I mentioned a few minutes ago. It's like the kids in the back seat in the car. Our own minds are that way. We want to quiet our own mind down. So we're going to acknowledge these things, push them out of the way, and get to work and get into the target. Excuse me. Any physical distractions, like a sore toe or a hurt finger, or could be anything, you acknowledge it on the first stage 1 sheet of your target. That's another way of pushing things out of the way that you don't want bothering you during a session. Any preconceived ideas about a target that you might be embarking upon should be acknowledged right from the get-go to push that out of the way. The whole thing is to be able to go into this work in an unbiased way, an honest way, and not analyze anything. On the protocols, like I said, mentioned earlier, it's a repetitive roadmap-like procedure designed to access and maintain a continuous flow of target-related data. And it has to be repetitive. You do the same, every time you do a target, you're doing it the same way over and over again. So it's almost like the protocols, even though you're following them, you know them so well, it's almost like they're not even there. You just flash through them and pull the data down. And the viewer must become so familiar with the protocols that they can work through them thoughtlessly. We mentioned that. Excuse me. So there's 5 stages in this form of remote viewing. First stage establishes target contact. This is where we use the ideograms in the very beginning. It's kind of like just getting the data to begin to flow. It's like the little pencil in the dam. A little bit of water starts flowing out. That water represents information. And pretty soon it gets heavier and heavier. And that's what happens in stage 1. In stage 2, we employ our senses of hearing, touch, taste, smell, all of our physical senses, and vision. In stage 3, we have a very basic sketch, and it's deliberately basic. You might have a really good idea of what you're working on, but you really only want to do just a basic outline. The minute you try to get into it and add all of this other detail to create a Rembrandt, so to speak, is when you're going to get in trouble, because it pulls, doing the artwork pulls your mind off the flow of data. So you don't want to get too detailed with your sketches, your drawings. You deliberately want to be basic. One time I did a target of, I didn't know what I was working on, I was blind, of a chevron a type shape flying over these mountains. And it was a UFO, and then when I was done, I discovered, when I found out what the target was I was working on, it was the Phoenix Lights, what they call the Phoenix Lights. Excuse me. So, but I just drew a very basic outline. I think I drew some lines showing motion, and I didn't try. You don't try to get into the drawings with too much accuracy in this form of remote viewing. And then we have a matrix, a data matrix, which is packed and filled with data about the emotional aspects, physical aspects, interdimensional aspects, historical aspects. All of these different things are in this matrix, and you kind of check these things off and roll through that, and you pull down a lot of information. And in stage 5, over here, you get the mouse to go, there we are. And stage 5 is usually performed with a monitor guiding the viewer into a very detailed and specific information. But there are some things you can do in stage 5. You can do your own timelining. You don't need a monitor to help you with that, because you know when the times are. All you have to do is ask yourself your own questions to pull the data out of you. Excuse me. And let's see, this involves type 3 data, solo blind, selected by third party. Okay, usually involves timelining and or map locational exercises. All right. Stage 5, the last stage in this remote type of remote viewing, can also be used for other tasks as an analytical sketch, maybe a schematic, maybe it's an electronic circuit, or a locational map or sketch. Maybe it's a symbolic diagram. And a lot of times, the drawings we make in remote viewing can be an actual drawing of a physical thing, or sometimes it can be a symbolic symbol or drawing that represents that thing. It all depends on our viewpoint, the way our minds work, see, and view things around us. We see, I mentioned doing timelining. We can do that without a monitor. And this so-called deep mind probe is when you remote view to find out what somebody's motive was. Why did somebody do something? What was the motive behind it? And that can be useful in solving crimes too, and things of that nature. Map vectoring, like I said, usually involves a monitor that will become involved in the session just at the right time when the viewer's near the end of his work. And an advanced remote viewer will know exactly where the target is. And again, to get to that point, practice makes perfect. Sorry, I have a little bit of a frog in my throat. So here's an example of past timelining. By the time you get to this stage in a remote viewing session, you know when this event was that you're remote viewing. In this case, let's say it's the sinking of the Titanic. And you'll have to ask yourself questions. You pull the data out of yourself because it's already stacked in there. So you can say, was this before or after Napoleon? It was after Napoleon. Was it before or after 1900? Yes, it was after 1900. Was it before or after World War I? No, it was before World War I. So you know you're in between 1900 and 1914. And it turns out the sinking of the Titanic was in 1912, April 5th. So it's by deductive thinking or reasoning, asking yourself these own questions, you know the answers. You just don't know you know them until you ask the questions. That's interesting psychology, isn't it? Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Yeah, I got it. Thank you. Nectar. Thank you. So that's how past timelining works. You know the answers. You just have to pull it out of yourself. It has all flowed in there with the data. Future timelining works the same way, but it's a little different. You have to work with anticipated events, maybe like political elections, which are presidential elections, which are 4 years apart, centennials, the Olympics, World Cups, events that are prominent in your own mind to use as future markers, and you'll learn that this event or whatever it is you're working on is in between, somewhere in between these two things. Future timelining is a little bit more difficult. In the past, like I said, you know the answers. You just have to pull it out. Okay, in future. Yeah, it's good for finding out people, places, events, which are more difficult because anticipated events sometimes change. They're not always held when they were supposed to be. So it makes this process a little bit more difficult. And also, we'll talk about remote viewing teams. A remote viewing team usually is about 6 or more viewers. And we don't always do the targets at the same time, but usually they were emailed to us, and we'd do the targets, and the recommended LST time period was on there as well. And so the completed target data was compiled and sent back to the facilitator, the one that handles all this stuff. And they would take all the matching data that lines up, and you could take that to the bank, folks. Okay, and after the training is complete, when somebody learns how to do remote viewing, I would highly recommend working together in pairs or groups. And you can work targets for each other until you get yourself built up to that point of where you can do anything you want. They generate their own targets and hone each other's skills to build each other up. Some other types of remote viewing are scientific remote viewing, technical remote viewing, there's controlled remote viewing, there's medical remote viewing. I alluded to that in the beginning, medical remote viewing. And there's still others, and all of these different types work. Some focus more on imagery, others focus more on data, some focus on a balance or a blend of both. So that's a little bit about other types of remote viewing. And this was a target I did, and this was way, way back, many years ago. It was the Roswell target, and I do a picture of a craft with 3 occupants in it, and I'm not sure of how many they found, but I had 3. And then I drew a picture of this high cliff or an arroyo, and that's what it crashed into, was one of these things when it came to a stop. And then I put my glasses on here, the data, I don't know if that's showing up well, I know. I knew, whoops, go back one. I knew what we were working on was some type of an aircraft, and it was dimensionally high. It was, the energy was intense. The physical aspects were, it was, I wrote falling, I probably shouldn't have wrote that column. It was falling, something falling high in the sky, falling, and we had fear. We had, and it was flying again. It kept coming up. And on the next sheet, stage 4, this was high. It was dimensionally. It was tall. It was way up in the sky. Other people were involved. Many people. There was some type of psychic energy involved here. I wrote all the things that circled what really pertains to it, and I had people here again. I had falling again. I had fear. This just keeps coming up and up, and it was something that happened outside. I had there was a group working together, and that's what they were doing at the time of the crash. And this is that chevron thing I was telling you about over the mountains and over Phoenix. I had the, like I say, you don't try to do a Rembrandt in your drawings. You just keep it very simple and basic. This is March 13th, 1997. And here's some of the other stuff. This is from a stage 2 sheet. There were some whirring sounds. It was smooth. The things that pertained, it was cool. Visuals were blue, gold, and yellow. This may have been inside the craft. It was bright. It was high. It was smells were fresh. It was outside. Verticals were low. The horizontals were flat and wide. And MDSV, mass density, space, and volume, were that it was heavy and it was huge. And the energetics were movement, energy, churning, and forcing, or some kind of force. My FTT, my feelings toward the target, was very interesting. I had no idea what I was working on. And land and mountains were involved, and Phoenix was surrounded by mountains. And it was an open area. There was a lot of energy. There was motion. It was outdoors. It was outside. Again, fresh air and an open area, expanding energy. That's propulsion, I presume. Subject or subjects, singular, plural, were involved with this. Strong emotion was involved. It was an event. Over here, it was a past event, an outdoor event, and some kind of a record was set, I wrote. In a way, that's true, I guess. This is Travis Walton. I've known Travis for a long time. And I did an interview with him for somebody else's TV show. And we did a long, long interview. And at the end of the interview, I had a chance to sit down and chat with Travis. Excuse me. I did a remote viewing target looking at Travis Walton's incident in the White Mountains Apache Sitgreaves National Forest near Snowflake, Arizona. And it revealed that the so-called, what was called a beam of light that struck Travis Walton really was an electrical discharge or an arc of electricity, but resulted in a flash, but it wasn't a beam of light per se. And that RV session revealing that information was performed by me in 1998. And in 2009, at the Aquarius Hotel in Laughlin, Nevada, I sat down. I was doing an interview with Travis about his 1975 UFO experience in the White Mountains, Arizona. And following that interview, I told Travis about this target and this session I did relating to his experience. I told him about the blast coming out from under the UFO, that it was really, and from what I could see, an electrical discharge or an arc, not specifically a beam of light, although light would result from an arc. And that discharge was not intentional. It was an accident. And so therefore the ETs took him on board the craft to rehabilitate him. If they zapped him on purpose, would they take him on board the craft and rehabilitate him? I don't think so. So that's what this target revealed. And it all seemed to make sense to Travis. Like at that point in time when we were talking, it was like an epiphany to him, like one of those Kodak moments, so to speak. And it was a nice time explaining this to him and talking with him. We have some books on remote viewing that are really interesting. Psychic Warriors by David Morehouse, Cosmic Voyage by Dr. Courtney Brown, Remote Viewing Secrets by Joe McMoneagle, Time Machine by Joe McMoneagle, and Sci Spies by Jim Morris. There's another book out there. It's called Entangled Minds by Dr. Dean Radin. And he is a fascinating guy to me. And, that's been out for quite a while now. I'm ashamed to say I haven't read it yet, but I will read it because the work he does is so fascinating. Excuse me, Entangled Minds. And this is Ingo Swann's book. It's out of print. I have a digital copy of it. But anyways, this is about things he remote viewed all around the moon, on the backside of the moon. Very interesting book. It's out of print. It's very difficult to get your hands on this thing. Let's see. There was a satellite a few years ago that orbited the moon. And I'm not sure of the name. It might have been Clementine. That's right. Okay, yeah. Thank you. And they took over 2 million, I think about 2.5 million photos of the entire moon, the surface. And they've only released about 700,000 of those. They're not showing us anything from the other side of the moon. Excuse me, those are our damn pictures. We paid for them. I want to see them. Don't we all want to see them? We own them. Show them to us. What's the problem here? I want to see those pictures. We paid for them. So, anyways, I don't want to get too far off the track, but that frustrates me.
They had some of those pictures on a TV show that I saw.
Yeah, but they won't show you all of them.
Probably not, but there was enough there that I could see that. It was weird.
Yeah. Okay. Here's some interesting institutions. The Monroe Institute, which is located in Virginia. They're devoted to the studies of non-local consciousness, to OBEs, astro travel, remote viewing. This was, by the way, a prerequisite for all of the military remote viewers. They had to attend this school and learn these techniques and practices before they could start out on their job as military remote viewers. And by the way, Dr. Robert Monroe authored 3 wonderful books. I read all 3 of them. Far Journeys, Journeys Out of the Body, and The Ultimate Journey. Funny thing about The Ultimate Journey, in that book, he built the Monroe Foundation, and he wanted to build a headquarters building to keep everything together and organized. So he had a dream of what the architecture should look like for that building. And so he went and built it, and it really had a Gothic appearance to it, this building that he built for the headquarters of the Monroe Foundation. And so anyways, a few years later, he went over to visit the Monroe Castle in Scotland. Being a good Scotsman, he wanted to go back to the homeland for a visit. And lo and behold, the Monroe Castle architecture is identical to the dream that he built from, the Monroe Foundation. I had a friend of mine, she was on my old TV show, Peggy Kane, and she was reading this book. She was waiting to catch an airplane, and the airplane came in, everybody got on it, and they took off, and she's still sitting there reading the book. She missed her plane. She loved that book so much. So there's another place called the Farsight Institute. That's founded by Dr. Courtney Brown, the author of Cosmic Voyage. And so that's their website, farsight.org. You can go there. I won't go there now. Oh, maybe we will. You got sound?
The main importance of psi is establishing a solid scientific basis to say the transpersonal should be looked at seriously.
I am able to sense a lot of different dimensions of life, and it's all interconnected. And apparently the rest of the world's not seeing that.
Thoughts are actually faster than the speed of light, and that's worth remembering.
This is useful in the sense of demonstrating to somebody something that's interesting, but it doesn't count as evidence in a scientific sense.
We are in wireless broadcasting with everything around us. Everything is broadcasting, everything is receiving. And once you get that in your consciousness, you'll never feel disconnected or separated again.
When I've asked them these questions about, do you really believe this? They look at me like, what's wrong with you? You can't see it? It's all around you.
But one very well-known scientist came back and said, this is the kind of thing I wouldn't believe in, even if it were true.
We humans are unlimited. And the more we practice something, the better we get.
DVD. It's a great show to watch. And, okay, what do we do? Oh, that's the cover. That's what it looks like. That's really worth watching. And again, Dr. Dean Radin's in there also. There's some interesting stuff in here. And this is a crop circle. I just threw this in here. My daughter lives in North Wales, so we get over there every couple of years to North Wales, Southern England, Scotland, to visit where my family originated from. And we were in this circle right there. And there we are. And you can see the chalk horse in the background up there on the hillside. And this is in the Alton Barns area, where a lot of the stuff seems to happen. And again, this is that interwoven, it's hard to see, some people have trampled on it a little bit, I think, but this interwoven core in the center that the real crop circles are known for. And it was a fascinating experience. You really felt when you lay down inside that thing that you were connected with every electron in the universe. Believe me, it was a wonderful experience. And this is so simple, even I can do it. So it's almost 3:30. I still do training. I'm available if you're interested. Get in touch with me, call me or email me. Talk to me afterwards. Maybe later on we'll do a Q&A later on, as time permits. And back to a select video. Oh yeah, there's another piece. I'm sorry. Here we go. Oh, later. Okay, we'll stop that. Okay. Leave it right there, I guess. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Check. Okay, so this clock is showing about 3:20. Let's be back here at 3:35. We want 15 minutes, correct, crew? 15 minutes? Be back here at 3:35 by this clock.